Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today has been a pharmacist for more than 40 years. While working a full-time job, he was pulled towards his passion of photography and started his aerial photography business, Aerial Photo Platform, or AP3. Please welcome Anthony Cioffi.
Thanks.
Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm very happy to have you on. It's a very interesting way that we met. I followed you down Route 44, hunted you down. I knew that you were just an interesting person and that I would have to have you on the show. So I'm really excited to have you on. Part of what I like to do is to start from the beginning of your beginnings, of what got you into becoming a pharmacist, and then what got you into aerial photography. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your backstory of your growing up and any impact that might have had on you today.
Okay, well, we got into pharmacy in 1980, went to St. John's University, graduated in 1985, and been in pharmacy ever since. The interest in chemistry was always there. It had nothing to do with drugs, as many people might think, but it didn't. It was a job. It was a career at the time. It was a really good opportunity to have a good working career. So we did that, and we've been in it. And like everybody, we all develop hobbies and interests and things of the sort. Photography was always one of them. Remote control airplanes is also one of them. So for many years, the two kind of mixed but never really met until I would say probably 5 or 6 years ago. I started thinking about what am I going to do at retirement? Of all things, you're thinking about retirement, and you think, well, what do we have to do? You talk to a financial planner. They're talking about viable income streams and things of the sort. So that comes to my mind. Anyway, I'm thinking about what am I going to do? So what am I going to do after I retire? So I figured, well, I've got to do something. So I've got my hobbies. I've got remote control aircraft, which is always a bunch to fly, a lot of fun to fly, and photography. So one day when I was fiddling around with the camera, I decided to look into it a little bit more and develop my skill even more and try and understand how things really, really function. Because I never thought about doing it, full time or even for any type of game. And then one day, I saw drones, and I started thinking. I said, "Gee, here's where the worlds collide. Mm-hmm. The remote control aircraft and photography collide." So for me, it was the collision of those two worlds that said, "Hey, I could maybe do something with this." Mm-hmm. A business starts with a customer, and that's how it all came to pass. And that's when I just started it, and one thing led to another.
And I mean, you make it sound so simple. I love how you really condensed a good 30 or 40 years into this small package. And I kind of want to take it apart a little bit, going back to your pharmacy days and what drew you to becoming a pharmacist. And something that you mentioned there was the opportunity, and also it sounds like a little security at the time of trying to figure out a path that was secure. And when I think about our audience of business leaders and entrepreneurs, I'm sure they have a balance of that, of trying to figure out what's the right opportunity for me right now, and then what's a safe bet. So just going back to your pharmacy days, now you mentioned a passion for chemistry.
Well, I was always good with chemistry. I hated history. I hated English. Didn't care for it at all, but I was always good with chemistry. So when I was in high school, a history teacher, I'll never forget, he asked me, and he said, "What do you plan on doing after high school?" And it was at that point in time, I didn't know. And most guys say, "Oh, I'm going to be a police officer. I'm going to go into the fire department or whatever. I'm an accountant or something like that." I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. So I remember him looking at the classified ads, and he said, "There's a lot of job opportunities for pharmacists." I never in a million years would have even thought of being a pharmacist. Never. It never entered my mind. He planted that seed in my head. So then I started thinking, I said, this is true. You got to be able to have some sort of gainful employment. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do? You have to do something.
Right.
So at the time, I looked into it. It was junior year in high school. And I said, this might be the answer. So I said, well, we're going to give it a shot. Worst case scenario is, you go find something else to do. But I actually went through 5 years of pharmacy school, graduated. At that point in time, there was a huge demand for pharmacists. So there was always a job opportunity. And that's the key, having that opportunity.
Right.
Fast forward to today real quick. Many kids that come into the pharmacy to work, I often ask them those questions, like, what are you going to do? How do you, what are you going to do to be gainfully employed? And a lot of them, you'd be surprised. A lot of them are really not 100% sure. They just don't know. And it was sort of like me. And I think back, well, this was just like myself. I don't try to steer them into pharmacy, but what I tell them is, in today's world, to really, really to have that viable income stream, and it has to be a good income stream, you either have to be a very successful business person creating your own business, and that's tough to do. It's hard. I will be the first to say it's not easy. Some people, they're very fortunate. They step in and all of a sudden they've got, every possible opportunity, and they're going from zero to, huge money in a short period of time. But there's a lot of work that goes in between. If you're not going to do that, you've got to have some form of paper or document to hang on the wall that says you're licensed by the state that you live in to do this. So nobody else can come in off the street and do the same thing you're doing. And that's the same advice I gave to my son, who is now an engineer. I said, you've got to find something that is uniquely qualifies you to be doing this particular job set and these set of skills.
It sounds very familiar to me of something that my grandfather may have said to my father about learning a trade and being, like you just said, having a specific skill that nobody can kind of infiltrate your job, can take your job away from you because you have that skill, and nobody can just pick up and say, oh yeah, I'm going to become a pharmacist. You have to really go to school and learn that skill. We have a commonality there. That's part of the reason why I became an insurance broker, was very similar, was that I wanted something that would be a safety net to some extent, but would also, like you just said, have some qualifications that would make it to where I have job security for a lifetime. And so that's how I saw that. So that's very, very insightful that you share that portion. When you're working with these younger people, I think that advice is very important that you're giving them. It's more of like an open-ended question of like the planning. I'm interested to hear of how you are able to manage them or direct them as with such an age gap between you, because you're talking about people maybe coming out of high school or college and trying to find their career path. I'm interested on your mentorship and how you do that.
Most of the people that I see that come in are not in college. Very few are in college. Sometimes I'll get some that are in pharmacy school, and those are great because they have a real interest in the job. And I could really sculpt them into what the real world is, as opposed to what other industries might be saying is the real world. Right. But it's not. This is where it's really happening and what's going on. So those people are good. The other folks that I see generally are people who are just high school graduates. And I have to say, for the majority of the time, a lot of them really don't know. Right. They just don't know. They're there working because mom and dad said, they need go get a job. You're 21 years old. You got to go get a job. You can't sit home and play video games all day long. Right. So how do you find a way to help them figure out what their passion is or find their path kind of? I really don't. Kind of like that high school teacher. I really don't try to guide them. I just try to pick their brain and try and understand what makes them tick. What are they interested in? What do they like to do? And some interests, sometimes they will say, yeah, I like video games, or I like this, or I like mechanics, whatever it is. The key that I try to put in their brain is that you need to have something, as I said earlier, you need to have something to hang on the wall that says you're uniquely qualified to do this particular job set, or that you have this set of skills. Then any one person can just come in off the street and start doing. Anybody can come in off the street and be a cashier at at a grocery store
Right.
or whatever department store. Anybody can do that for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something else to be said for somebody who goes into engineering to become an engineer, somebody who becomes a pharmacist, somebody who becomes a doctor, a lawyer. I
Right.
mean, these are jobs that really you have something that hangs on the wall that says, I'm
Right.
uniquely qualified to do this job. So that's the whole key. You have to put that in perspective for them and say, look, you need to do this. You have to. Let's face it, today's economy, the way the world is today, you cannot have a decent education. Years ago, what was it? Not too well, 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they were saying that people who were just graduating college, it wasn't enough. You needed to have not only a master's degree, but maybe even a PhD, because that's what the companies were looking for. It wasn't enough just to go to 4 years of college and get out and say, okay, I'm a CPA now or whatever.
Yeah, times have changed with education and the way that it all works.
Yeah.
Going back to using this certificate as the catalyst to your career in the pharmacy world. Where did that start? So did you start working for somebody, or did you open up your own pharmacy?
I never opened my own pharmacy. I always worked for somebody, because at the time, capital was really, really hard. Coming from a hardworking Italian family, we didn't have all of the fruits of life that some other people are fortunate to have. So capital to come up with that was really hard. So I never opened my own pharmacy. Do I regret it? No, I don't think so. But I guess in a way it kind of holds you back not owning your own business. There is some forced appreciation there, I guess, over time. So I always worked for other companies, which was fine. I had no problem with that. When at the end of the night or the day, I put the key in the door, I went home. I didn't worry about it.
Right.
I slept at night.
So it sounds like you, and I don't think you have any regrets. I truly believe that you don't have any regrets. You don't strike me as the type of person that would. But you may have had the idea or thought to start your own business, because you did start your own business much later in life. So at the time you did think about it. Capital was a restriction. You mentioned that there are some restrictions to working for somebody. What were some of those restrictions to you personally that you felt where you wanted to do more?
Well, working for somebody, you had to operate the business the way they wanted you to operate it. You can come up with an idea and say, I would like to do it this way. Maybe you can pitch the idea, but 9 times out of 10, they had their own set cookie cutter format that they wanted you to follow. So it was really hard in that way. You were always restricted from certain pay increases. You were not really afforded the real cream of the crop of what the collection was at the end of the day. You got your pay, and it was a fair pay,
right?
But you didn't make the whole thing,
right?
You weren't reaping the whole reward,
right?
But there's something to be said for that. There's a lot of downside to having that. And
well, like you said too, you also just were able to put the key in the door and go home and be worry free. Exactly. I'm also very interested so when I speak about business leaders, we have our entrepreneurs who are starting their own businesses, and they could be solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs of large corporations. And then the same thing with our business leaders, where they could be entry level type of business associates going into executives and going to C-suite. And I'm always just interested in how we can help them through our story, through your story, climb that corporate ladder or start their own business. And I think you have both sides of the coin there. And so when we're thinking about these challenges that you might have had while working for someone else, how were you able to adapt to them and be able to implement some of the things, because you stayed in it for 40 years. So there's no way you were able to do 40 years without being a little bit happy, right? So how were you able to implement some of your own personal feel to the job and be able to make it a better job and make it a better life for yourself?
Well, in the corporate world, it's a different world. There's no question about it. Things operate a little bit differently than if you're down at the service level, which is where I always was, working at the service level, literally dealing with patients face to face. So over the years of being in pharmacy, you learn certain things, you learn certain ideas, you grasp onto different concepts and ways of doing things. And with those ideas and things that I've learned, I incorporated those into my current business, and I always kind of remember those and said, if I was this, how would I want this to react?
Mm-hmm.
Or if I was the customer, how would I want the person I was talking to that I had an issue with to react? What would I want them to do for me? And I never forgot that. And that's something that I, to this day, do in my own business with photography.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an issue or anything or question, whatever the case is, I would always say to my mind, if it was me on the other end, what would I want that person to do for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. I make sure that I take care of whatever needs to be taken care of.
And so you did that throughout your career. I mean, being a pharmacist, you are, like you said, in the service industry, you're serving these patients and client facing. So that's definitely a huge part to being able to adapt is understanding what needs to be fixed and how can I insert and fix it. So later on in life, you decide to become an entrepreneur. So you're still a pharmacist, right?
Yep.
And you still work your regular 9 to 5, we'll call it. I'm sure the hours vary, but you still work that. And then you decided to start your own business. You mentioned to me that this had to do with the gig economy, and you saw an opportunity. You mentioned it at the top of the show here. Let's talk about that a little bit. So you get into this hobby, which I think is really important. When you're starting something new and taking a chance at something, you better be passionate about it, right?
Absolutely, no question.
And so you obviously have a passion for photography. And tell me, I feel like it was like the writing was on the wall for you of like the gig economy and everything. And you were like, I got to go for this shot. I'm interested because you mentioned opportunity with pharmacy. And then I feel like there's a correlation here of like opportunity with the aerial photography. So I'm just interested in that writing on the wall for you and what that feeling was like for you.
There is. One of the things that comes to mind is the two hobbies, they really clashed. Even though I did them both, it was a way to mix both of those worlds together.
Mm-hmm.
And having that passion to understand and learn more about photography always was a drive for me. But this business didn't start out with me waking up one morning and saying, oh, I'm going to go out and start a photography business today,
right,
just for the heck of it. No, it didn't start out that way. It started out, again, with financial planning, thinking about what am I going to do as a viable income stream when I retire, because I'm not going to be doing this for another 40 years. So, I had to come up with an idea, and I thought, well, gee, what can I do once I do leave the pharmacy world? I want to have something that I enjoy doing and something that's going to potentially give me some sort of income.
But it's interesting that you say that because, 40 years as a pharmacist and working for different companies, you have, I'm sure, retirement and everything. So there's still something more to it. There is, right?
There is.
There's something innate in you that I think.
It's the drive to understand and learn more and to really do these hobbies that actually are you're doing it as a hobby, but you're actually doing it as a service.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually getting paid to do something that you really enjoy doing. So, and at the same time, it's sort of like a win-win situation because now I've got an income stream. I'm really enjoying this, and I've already got the people skills where I know how to deal with the clients direct, and customers, and so on and so forth. It's all about customer service,
mm-hmm.
So that's a real
key. And then because they're paying, you could buy some really cool cameras, right?
Yeah, you can, like I mentioned capital earlier because I wasn't able to do my own. Have my own pharmacy business because, like I say, coming from a small Italian family in the Bronx, we didn't have all sorts of, cash denominations that we can tap into to do this. So, but over the years, making money in pharmacy, it allowed me to develop a significant amount of capital to put into this business and to buy the equipment that I need to buy to get it going. And one thing leads to another. It's not that you just one day you go out and you buy, $30,000, $40,000 worth of gear and say, okay, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
You piece things together a little at a time.
Yeah, and the other thing to make a note of is in the 80s, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the 80s, capital was not as accessible as it is today, of the SBA loans, of all the different types of programs that are in place to help entrepreneurs, or even when we look at these different seeding programs where they put you in touch with angel investors and all sorts of different investment groups. that wasn't as accessible. It was probably around, but it wasn't as accessible in the 80s, right? To where you can just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to start a pharmacy. I'm going to get a loan and start, right?
Yeah, I would say that's the case. It it may have been available, but I wasn't in tune to it.
Yeah,
it just wasn't.
It wasn't the way that it is today.
And I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about starting, having my own play. I mean, I did, but there wasn't enough drive there to say, you know what, I'm going to blast through this,
right.
and I'm going to go.
But
for it.
you learned a lot through your experience working for others at a pharmacy. So we'll fast forward to AP3, where you mentioned, I think is very important, that you didn't just start the business and buying $40,000 worth of gear. Not that that's what you have today or don't have today. You didn't just start it just like that.
Right.
You started off flying planes before drone planes came out. Tell us a little bit about that hobby and what that hobby entails and what that's like.
In 1988, 89, I started getting into remote control aircraft. You run into a few friends and they talk about things. So that's an interesting hobby. So I got into that. I started building quarter scale aircraft, putting the engines in, literally building the planes from the ground up. And you can imagine there's hundreds of hours put into building these things.
Wow. So
over the years, I've had my mishaps where you walk away from the flying field with a big pile of matchsticks.
Oh my goodness!
When you're done, you've got hundreds of hours put into this thing, and you have to rebuild it and so on. Anyway, you learn, and you learn from your mistakes. So, the remote control aspect of things, I learned and how to operate them really well without an issue. So for me, when I picked up a drone, it wasn't a difficult thing to start flying it.
Right.
I just needed to understand what was happening on the joysticks, and that was it. So it worked out very well. It was a great transition. It stayed with me how to do it, and it was like riding a bike.
Yeah, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
What was the big draw for you to flying the planes before drones?
It was just I always enjoyed that concept of flight. I thought it was a neat thing, and way back in the early 70s, late 60s, my father had taken the old remote control. It wasn't even remote control; it was wire controlled, and I always remember that it was a wire controlled plane, and we took it out to a field in Pelham Bay Park. This is probably 1967, 68, and we would fly it there, but it was control wire, so you'd have to sit there and spin it around, just kind of go around, and you make the thing go up and down, do what it needs to do, and that always stuck with me. So then when I saw the remote, and I said, oh, gee, I don't even have to have wires connected to this thing. I could do this. It was fantastic. So that was the impetus to get into it.
Did your dad get to fly it with you?
No, unfortunately he didn't. He did not do that. But he saw that I was into it, and he saw a lot of the planes that I had built.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun, and that was the impetus to get it going.
Yeah, there definitely had to have been something very important, like you just said, which was I think back to your childhood of flying it with your dad, because you just said you could spend countless hours repairing the plane. You probably spend sometimes more hours repairing it than you do getting to fly it, right?
It's true.
So you really got to love it and be passionate about it.
And that's why you have to know what the heck you're doing, because you spend all of these hours building this stuff. The last thing you want to do is go out there and
and make a mess of it.
Yeah, come home with matchsticks.
And then tell us about, because now that part is one passion and hobby, and then now we have the photography passion and hobby. Mm-hmm. So tell us how you got into that hobby.
Interesting. At the time, when I was doing the remote control aircraft, there was a lot of concept about putting in small cameras in the planes. And life changes, you get married, you have kids, whatever the case might be. Life changes. I never got a chance to actually get that small camera and put it in the aircraft. And I think that stuck with me. And when I saw the drone have the camera, and I was like, here's the answer to putting the camera in the airplane. Mm-hmm. And
what was the interest for that, for having the camera for you in the plane outside of just flying it?
Just to see what things look like from the air, what you were doing. I mean, everybody knows what it kind of looks like, but to be able to take those pictures and say, hey, I took these pictures, check this out.
Right.
That was it.
It changes the whole game.
Changes the whole game.
So let's go to your financial planning for this. So you have these really great hobbies. You have a great career that you're working in and are successful in, and then you have these two great hobbies that you're like, I could bring them together now and enjoy them and start a business. And you mentioned financial planning, which I think is really, really important for anybody starting a business. So on the entrepreneurial side. What were some of the key questions that you asked yourself or that your accountant asked you that you wanted to put in place before, let's say, incorporating or before investing any money into it?
It wasn't anything like that. It was my own doing. I didn't actually sit down with an accountant and discuss it. I just thought, well, gee, this starts with, a business starts with a customer. Mm-hmm. So I had a number of people asking me, about this. So then I had said, all right, well, I'm gonna do something. So
well, wait. So you had already started doing some kind of aerial photography that people were asking you about?
No, people were talking about it, and
generally speaking.
Yes, generally speaking. So after I had purchased the equipment, I didn't have the business at the time. I just had the equipment.
Okay.
And someone had asked about it.
So you were doing it as a hobby.
Right.
And then.
Right, exactly. And that's when I said, I bet you there's a market for this.
And I understand it wasn't market research in the sense of really digging down and going to specific things, but what was your market research to figure out that it was a market for it?
Just seeing the photography aspect of things, the real estate aspect of things, how many different things needed to be photographed. And there's so many different things today. When you look at photography in general, there's so many different aspects of photography that you can do.
Right.
It's endless. And, people like to be creative. And as myself, I enjoy being creative with certain things in photography. So that was what kept propelling me forward to try and do this and keep going and keep going and keep trying.
So it was more of like a concept, really, of like, I can make a business out of this.
Right.
It wasn't, you didn't have any specific numbers in mind of I can earn X amount or I need X amount. It was more of this idea of this is a business and there's an opportunity here. And as long as I enjoy doing it and find customers to be able to work with,
right,
it's a viable business.
Exactly. And that's, the thing too is that I have, being a pharmacist and having that income, I didn't really have to worry in a sense that if I lost the job or if I didn't get this particular gig or whatever the case might be, it didn't bother me as much. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But
I don't think it is.
From my perspective, it was like, okay, I could stay the course and hold my ground, and this is what it is, And you kind of when you're able to do that, you kind of weed out a lot of certain clientele that.
Right. You work with who you want to work with and what you want to work on.
Yeah, I mean, certain situations, you can't afford to keep to have those types of clients.
I love the simplicity of this plan because what I've learned in these interviews and through the different knowledge that I've acquired through books and all this other stuff is that there's no cookie cutter way to start a business. There's definitely an idea. There's definitely something that they teach in school of you do, financial planning and and all this other stuff. And you could follow that path and be successful, or you could follow that path and fail. There really is no way that's exact. And so that's why I love the simplicity of your way, which is just, I have an idea and I want to just pursue it. But the one common thread that I always hear about and see is the passion, is that there has to be passion behind it. And we go back to this cookie cutter way of like school tells you go this way. If there's no passion behind it, you could follow every example that you're given. But if there's no passion.
If you don't have the drive to do it, it's not going to be there.
Right.
That's the key. If you don't have the passion, to use your term, if you don't have that, it's not inside you, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
It's not going to drive you to keep going to look for a certain client or type of business or whatever the case might be. It has to be there.
Yeah, I think that's so significant for entrepreneurs and even business leaders is that anything that you're pursuing, you got to be passionate about it, because there's no cookie cutter way that's going to get you to success. There's different, there's definitely tried and true methods that, if you continue that path, then you might end up successful.
Yeah.
But the passion behind it is really the big key here. The other thing that I think is interesting, and why I agree with you about what you said of having the backing of being a pharmacist, is I had heard a podcast, I can't remember his last name, but his name's Naval, and he is one of the founders to a company called Angels List. And Angels List is what hooks up startup companies with angel investors. It's an online platform. So he's very well known in the Silicon Valley world. And in this podcast, what he talks about is in order to find your like ultimate happiness, and in order to pursue your passions and work like you did, he said this is like, I could quote him. He says, "Let's get you rich first." And that's exactly what he said. Let's get you rich first, because once you have enough income to where you don't have to worry about your home, you don't have to worry about cars, food, your family, and all the other comforts of life, hopefully comforts of life, right? When you don't have to worry about all that stuff, then you can really, truly follow your passion, just like you just said to me, which is you can just go after it, and you don't have to take the job that you don't want to do on a rainy or snowy, sleety day. You could say, you know what, I don't need that job today.
Exactly.
And you could take the one on a beautiful sunny day instead. And you could take it for less money even, because that's not what's important to you. What's important to you is getting the beautiful shot.
That's right.
And I think that there's a lot of significance to that. So you're now working with different types of customers, and you've said it a few times, is about the customer first. You said this line where the customer comes in first.
Customer service.
Customer service. And Amazon has built a business on customer service. Right. Amazon, and I think most of the other businesses that have followed suit, put this in their principles of ultimate customer service, or the ultimate customer satisfaction. I'm interested to hear what that means to you, and how you provide ultimate customer satisfaction. Where it starts.
It starts with showing up on the day that you say you're going to be there, at the time you say you're going to be there. That's a huge problem today with many industries. I run into it all the time. Even personally, you call up a plumber, can you come? Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow at 10. Well, here it is. It's 2 days later at 10, and they're still not here. No phone call. It's difficult to find people. So that's one of the things. I think a key component is making sure that if you're going to be there on time, consistency is absolutely crucial. You have to be consistent in everything you're doing, from the point of you showing up on time to delivering the product on time and delivering a quality product all the time. Consistency. That's the key that I believe all of my clients, why they keep coming back, because they know if I say I'll be there Wednesday at 10, I'll be there probably Wednesday at 9:30, setting up, getting ready to go. That's the way I operate. There's nothing worse than telling somebody you're going to be there at 2. I mean, look, certain things happen, and if you have to call and say, I'm going to be late, these things happen. Life happens. But the key is that you are providing consistency. That's my focus. Consistent.
It's a focus that is tried and true, actually. When you think about using McDonald's as an example of what made McDonald's successful, and all these other chains or any other huge corporations that we're very familiar with today, of Walmarts and all these other things, is that they're consistent. You go to a Walmart in New York, you go to a Walmart in Texas, in California, sure, they'll have some little niche goods that are to Texas or to California, but it's consistently the same. It's the same layout. It's the same service. It's the same everything. And consistency is huge. We rely on consistency. And that's why we'll go to a McDonald's over a mom and pop that you'll see in an obscure town, because you know what you're going to get at McDonald's. Now, personally, I choose not to go to those kinds of restaurants, but that's why they're so successful. So
that's a good example.
What you say there is certainly true about that consistency. While running a business, it is hard, and you said that. There are certain challenges that come up in your day and that impede that process. How do you overcome some of those challenges for your customers to still provide them the best customer service of maybe, a camera breaks or something happens to where you're like, you know what, I am going to have to reschedule today or something, but you still want to make sure that they know that they can count on you. How do you overcome a situation like that?
Redundancies. That's the key. Redundancies. multiple cameras, multiple devices. In the trade, they say if you have two cameras, you have one. Because if one breaks, you're really down to one. So it's always about redundancies, built-in redundancies, being able to prepare and be ready for the unexpected situation to happen and be able to react to it. That's what I do. I make sure that when I go out, I am ready to perform whatever I need to perform, and I'm ready to do what I need to do. So I have built-in redundancy. So if something does break, I have a backup. I'm ready to go. That's key. The other thing, just to touch back on what you were saying about consistency and stuff, the other thing that I really live by is I never, never, never overpromise and underdeliver. That's a bad thing. Never. You're better off not saying anything than just saying, "Oh yeah, I can give you this." And meanwhile, when you get there, you find out that you can't. But these things come with experience too. So you've got to learn all of that stuff.
Right. You paint a realistic picture for your customer so that they understand what they're going to get. And then if you're able to provide more at the moment, then you provide more. I like the idea of redundancy. I think that you're 100% right that a lot of times we find, or services that I've worked with in the past as well, that they are unprepared in that sense of something fails, a battery fails, or the camera fails, or whatever it is that we're working on at the moment, and they don't have a backup to it. And you're right. I think as a hobbyist, right, if you're working side by side with a friend and this is just a hobby or whatever, and it fails, you're like, hey, you know what?
Matter.
Let's go grab a beer while that charges up or whatever.
No, but you've got a paying client.
That's what I was just going to say.
You've got a paying client. They have a need.
Right.
And they have a specific deadline to get that need taken care of.
Right.
They're relying on you to come in and do that job. And that's the whole thing. So you've got to be able to handle any situation that gets thrown at you.
And I would say that that's what makes the difference between an amateur and a professional.
That's one of them,
said.
yeah, absolutely.
What would be the next one?
I guess the overpromise and underdeliver. That's a key feature, key fact. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who just don't know. They go out and they'll say, I can do this, that, and the other thing. They get there, but they don't know what the heck they're doing.
What they're doing.
I can go back and look at some of my things that I've done from very early on, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, how could I even consider that to be good? And at the time, I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But you see, as you grow, how your technical skills become really, really fine-tuned and honed.
Right.
And you see it. And I have a friend of mine that we talk about this all the time. He said, have you ever gone back and looked at some videos, some aerial shots of things or how you flew the drone, from 5-6 years ago, and look at it? I mean, things stand out like this. It's really amazing.
And you work on changing it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, you do.
When we go back to the way that you acquired customers, so and the reason why I say when we go back is because my assumption, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that by providing ultimate customer service, that's the Amazon phrase, ultimate customer service, by providing that customer service that you do, I'm sure you have a great word of mouth reputation today. But to start, how did you start marketing and how did you start getting customers to learn about your service?
That's a good question, and it can be a very expensive situation, especially for somebody new starting out. And I went through it. When the second you get your business online and it starts to become, I'm not even sure what area people find these businesses, but what I'm talking about here is people who are out there promising you that you're going to show up on the first page of Google search, at the top of the first page. To me, that was the first thing. I thought, well, gee, this is great. This guy's going to know what he's doing. I didn't know at the time. And you could be paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands of dollars to these people who are promising you. Again, it's a case of overpromise and underdeliver. You've got to really, really be careful with that. Be very selective in who you're entrusting to do any of that marketing. There's many of them out there. A lot of people, I get emails all the time. Hey, we can do this, we can do that. But, I kind of just filter them out and say, I stuck with Google. Okay? Because when you think about it, when people are searching for something, Do they say I went and I Binged it? I Yelped it? No, I Googled it. So Google is in the mindset of everybody today. Most people use Google. I mean, yes, those other things do exist, but most people use that search engine because it's probably, if not the largest search engine going, and probably the best. So I started filtering out a lot of the requests of promises of getting on the first page of a search engine. I put small amounts of money into advertising. Small amounts, because you can ramp up that bill real fast and not be able to cover it with clients that you make it, you think you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So you just spend thousands of dollars on this here, and you don't get anything out of it. So starts steady and slow wins the race in my mind. So if you can provide a consistent, there's that word again, a consistent amount of funds on a monthly basis to a specific advertiser of your choice, whoever it is. I just happen to use Google. And I can't even call it advertising because I don't really use advertising per se. They have a tremendous suite of tools that you can use for your business that allows you to get in front of potential clients that are searching for specific things on the web. In this case, real estate photography, aerial photography, construction site, progressive imaging, that type of stuff, orthomosaic mapping, any of these things. So I provide just a small amount of funds towards that type of exposure, because you could spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Just go look and see what the fees are to have that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, just starting out, be very mindful and be very cautious. You're going to have tons of people calling you, sending you emails, promising you this, that, and the other thing. You may fall for them the first time, like I did. The first 2 or 3, I was like, wait a minute, what am I spending all this money? What am I getting? I'm not getting anything for it. It was just literally throwing money away.
What were some of those advertising programs that didn't work? Was it the Bings and the Yelps of the world?
Well, Yelp was a very, and I don't want to bash anybody here, but I had a very interesting experience with Yelp. And I mean, yeah, they trade on the stock market today, so they are a legitimate company. But it was some of the phone calls that I got from them, and you get to learn from a lot of these phone calls, and they constantly will call me and ask me, "Oh, well, you got to advertise, you got to do this, you got to do that," and I got bad vibes, and a couple of times it was bad turns. They promised me whatever, and I said to myself, now how do I know that they're not just clicking away on whatever it is, some sort of a bot on my particular thing? So, oh yeah, look at this, you're getting all of these clicks, but meanwhile, there's no turns into customers. So what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And that happened a few times. And, I'm not an IT guy, I'm not a social media guy, although I do have presence there on social media. That's, I'm way before the social media aspect of things. I'm from the days of you put an ad in the Daily News and advertising
the what?
business.
No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly, the Daily News. Right? So things like that. So now social media is taking over. There's a lot of other different things. So
I want to go to that, what you just mentioned there about the not knowing if people are clicking. I think it's very important when we think about our people out there who are in a business or starting a business or the marketing director of a business or whatever it is who handle the advertising of a business, is understanding the difference between views, which is what we're talking about here, or clicks, and versus click-through rate, or versus turning them into a customer, which is really at the end what everybody cares about. And putting the importance on that. So did you have any type of tracking methods or any ways to be able to figure out where this customer came from? Was it through my Google ad program? Was it through my Yelp program? I would be interested to hear your ways of doing that.
Google My Business has a ton of metrics that you can look at. But you have to understand a lot of that material. I don't fully grasp a lot of it. It's beyond me where my mind takes me with this stuff. I don't fully understand a lot of it. So I look at it from the standpoint of getting customers either word of mouth or somehow, some way finding out how they found me. most of the people say, I found you on Google. So they basically click through, and it's all about your website. Does your website project what you do?
Mm-hmm.
These are very important avenues. These are the things that people see first. Your website, is it really a good representation of what you do? That's the key. The other thing too, there's a lot of metrics involved with how your website works too with Google. The load time, it's really, really complicated. In my mind, it's very complicated. One of the things I fought with for a long time was I kept getting these messages from people saying, "Oh, your page is taking too long to load," and and give me all of these different. You should, let us do your web page. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how the heck? I'm following all the protocol that Google gives me, or whoever it is at the time. I'm using Google as an example. They say, okay, you should do this, 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 and this. So I did that. I made the images certain sizes, the whole thing, and it didn't really change much of anything as far as load times are concerned or anything. And I thought to myself, my God, I'm spending so much time trying to figure out all of these little things. I mean, you can just either A, forget about it and just go on and stay the course and do what you have to do, or you can, pay somebody thousands of dollars on a monthly basis to do it for you. I chose not to do that because, again, I don't want to say good money after bad, but I just thought, well, gee, let me start slow, and I'm going to work with what I have first, keeping it small and simple. And that's what I've done. And that seems to work for me. There's no reason for me to go outside that because it's functioning right. It's working.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will say, well, gee, that's not good. You got to expand. You've got to build out and all this other stuff. Well, yeah, true. But for me in my life right now, where I'm at, looking at retirement and say the next 5 years, I'm happy where I'm at. And that's important to me.
I think it's so nice because it follows that plan, that simplicity that you started the business with, of just keeping it simple. I think that that's a really important message because you're right. There is so many different opportunities and different. We have all these influencers on social media now that you could get all this money and go seed funding and grow these huge companies. And while that's wonderful for some, it's not for others. And you need to realize where you're at. And realize who you are as an individual and figure out how do you want your business to grow? Do you want to just scale very quickly? As Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, would say, it's called blitz scaling, where you would just take a bunch of money and just make this huge company. Or do you want to start slow? And like what you're talking about is just keeping it simple, starting slow and taking it piece by piece. And my business coach would tell me just doing it at your own pace and doing it at your own speed, which is very nice too, because then you're able to just see the different changes and the different turns in your business and really be hands-on with some of that. I think it's very, very interesting. So where do you see AP3 going after retirement? Because you'll have so much time on your hand now to really ramp up or slow down.
That's a good question. It's all predicated on the economy and what's happening out there and what people want to see and what people want to do. So I really don't know. I'm hopeful that it's going to remain a good, viable income stream for me, and it doesn't have to be millions and millions of dollars. It's not going to be a multi-million-dollar company. I'm not looking to develop that.
Right.
I'm happy keeping it where it's at.
Enjoying it.
Enjoying it as I don't want to say a hobby, because people say, well, if it's a hobby, then it's not a business. Not true. I mean, if you're making money from stuff that you enjoy to do, it's going to be fine.
Right.
The other thing, too, regarding the advertising, which really, and this is just a plug for a local guy, which you and I know. He basically is helping all of the Hudson Valley local businesses.
Oh, Ramon. Yeah.
Ramon Pinheiro. He started that, and his concept of how to utilize Facebook to a better advantage than what most of the people can do, it works. It helps. There's no question about it. So it's good to get involved in some sort of a local group like that, where they're involved in supporting local businesses, small businesses. And that's another very important aspect of things.
Yeah, what he did is he created a community online.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. Facebook groups was there before Ramon came into play. But what he did for the Hudson Valley businesses and what he's continuing to do for the Hudson Valley businesses and wants to expand nationwide is he's created an online community, which is certainly more effective than just being the lone man or lone woman standing on the corner on the social media, the social media corner, that is, where nobody really knows you. When you're in a community of 5,000 and now he's got 10,000 plus, people start get to know you, and it's a great word of mouth in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's something to be said when you share a post to the group and he goes and, I don't know what you call it, reshare it. Like I said, I'm not a social media guy, but what he does, it goes out to the masses. So a lot of people get to see what you're doing and your work. It's important. It's another way of another way of advertising or gaining clients,
and connects you to
other people,
to everyone else.
Yeah.
So as we conclude, I'm just thinking about your history, your life, and all the different events and different changes that took place throughout the years, and I'm interested to think of what lessons you may have learned from some of either the challenges or successes when you look back. What's one significant or impactful lesson that you have learned and that you can share with our audience today?
You never get a second chance to make a first impression on somebody. So that's important. Always be on point. Always show up with your A game when you're dealing with customers, especially if it's a new customer or even a repetitive customer. Always show up with your A game.
And be prepared.
Redundancies.
The Boy Scout model.
That's it.
Well, Anthony, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Before we wrap, and this will of course be in the show notes, could you just share any handles or any ways to contact you for AP3 or for anything else, and your website? Yeah,
sure. The website is ap3online.com. All of the information is there. We have our packages that we offer, some sample images and all the stuff that we do. We have a plethora of different photography aspects that we cover. We have a social media presence, both on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as well. But as I said, I'm not really a social media guy, so I can't really say that I know how to exactly find that stuff, but it's there.
And website name? ap3.com.
ap3online.com.
Online.com. Okay, got it. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast.